Good morning and welcome to BC Cattlemen's Public Affairs and Education Committee's Coffee Shop Talks, a webinar series. Before we jump into this morning's topic on employee retention, I want to do some housekeeping items, introduce our speaker, and introduce BC Cattlemen's Association. So BC Cattlemen's has been the official voice for BC cattle ranchers since 1929. For over 90 years, the association has represented the interests of beef cattle producers across the province. As one of the committees of the association, the Public Affairs and Education Committee has created a webinar series called Coffee Shop Talks, and we're covering 6 different topics over 6 months, so January to June of 2019. We've done mental health, succession planning, and employee management. We're jumping into employee retention today, and we'll be covering off mentorship and financial management in the coming months. All this information can be found on our website at www.cattlemen.bc.ca/coffeeshoptalks.htm or by calling the office toll free at 1-877-688-2333. So this webinar series was funded in part by the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and the Government of BC through Investment Agriculture Foundation of BC and the BC Cattlemen's Association. So thank you very much to our funders. Before we jump in, I'd like to introduce myself and cover some housekeeping items. So I'm Bree Patterson with BC Cattlemen's Association, their beef production specialist, and the staff support for the Public Affairs and Education Committee. So I get to be your host for these series. So this is my 4th time chiming in with you guys, and I hope you're enjoying it so far. Everyone has been put to mute, so that way you can hear us effectively. This is being recorded, so you'll find it on our YouTube channel and on our website in the coming months. And of course, at the end, we'll allocate about 10 minutes to answer any questions. Those can be shot over through your chat box to the participant named Bree, and I'll read them out loud. So now that we are ready to jump in, let us introduce Reg Stewart of AgSafe BC, Ranching Safety Consultant, and he has lots of knowledge and wealth to tell us all about employee retention. Your turn, Reg.
Oh, thank you, Bree. This is a matter that's really near and dear to my heart because I've been in a number of supervisory roles in my extended time with the RCMP, and as the field superintendent for AgSafe in the province of British Columbia, I have the privilege of supervising a number of people, some great employees throughout the province, and I see on many ranches some of the challenges that people face in having good people and then retaining good people. And so I have a kind of unique perspective because I get to work on so many ranches and have in my almost 20 years with AgSafe seen a variety of methods that people handle their employees with and what seems to work and what is a real challenge both to retention and to actually hire people in the first place. And so there's some real challenges out there and there's some real victories. There's a lot of success stories. I also have the advantage of continuing to be an employee. And I remember getting a job as a waiter between writing jobs one time in a restaurant, and they said, "Have you ever waited tables?" I said, "No, ma'am, but I've eaten in a lot of restaurants." And so I think being an employee, you sometimes have a good idea as well of what it is that makes you stay there and why you want to work for that person still. So kind of unique perspective from both the management perspective that I bring as well as that of the low guy on the totem pole and the humble worker for my great employer. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome, Reg. So yeah, if you guys had turned into our mental health one, you would have seen Reg with another guest speaker, Robin. So I'm very excited to have Reg back for our Coffee Shop Talks. And as you can tell, unique, interesting perspective. So let us dive into the questions that the committee has curated for you today. So the first one off the hop is tips and tricks to keep employees around for the long haul.
Well, I think that much of that depends on value. I think that as an employee and as a manager of people, that if that prospective employee or that employee who's been with you for a long time, if they feel that they are valuable, if they have an understanding of their clarity of their job, if they think that you make decisions that include them, allow them to function with decision-making capability when and where you realize that they know exactly what they ought to be doing and how to do it, those kind of freedoms are really important to a worker in this day and age, and I think increasingly so. The young workforce that we have today is a workforce that likes to be mentally challenged. They like to be engaged. They like to have input, and we can either contest that or embrace it. And if we embrace it, we tend to get employees who really like to be with us for the long haul. And I think that's really key to the retention for the long haul. I think it's so important that they share and understand the vision as well, Brie. I think that if you have an employee who knows where you're going and can be part of getting you there, it's very, very helpful. And I've seen that be part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem. I've had the occasion to work on places where they ask for your input and then you repeatedly observe that your input doesn't really carry any weight, and it isn't very long before you're looking down the road and seeing somewhere where you are valued. And much of that value is demonstrated through relationship as well. I know we'll talk about that in greater depth, but the relationship that one can have with their employee, the employer relationship, members of the family who are participants in that and how that interacts, the role of the supervisor. And at EgSafe, I'm absolutely thrilled with a development course that we have for supervisors that helps them in all of these aspects, like how to be a better supervisor and what meets the requirement of being a supervisor. And beyond that, just how to be a good supervisor, like what makes someone want to come to work and be there working for you. So I think those are really helpful tools that are available to people as well.
That's awesome. And as a younger person, I can think of many friends and family members who, yes, we want to be engaged. We want you to use our skills. A lot of us have gone off to university and college, and we want to be able to apply that information that maybe we don't have the years of experience and the know-how from, putting our feet to the ground for 20 years, but we have a lot of really awesome education we want to share with the other generations or the other workers in our workforce too. So being engaged is definitely a key for this younger millennial type generation that's coming into the workforce right now.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. I think that particular worker is also one that looks for a really healthy life-work balance, and employers can do a lot towards that through some incentives and how they understand that. So there are those days that are 15 hours, but there are also days which don't have to be that long, and so if you can trade off in that sometime, and a cold winter day and you get everything fed and the water is working and stuff, and you got a 6-hour day instead of a 10-hour day, millennials in particular really feel valued when you recognize that their time and their life balance is important.
Yeah.
And so I think that is one thing that helps keep people in places when they realize that it is part of a lifestyle, and we are in an industry that doesn't pay as competitively as some other industries do. So when people come to this, they come because of a love. It's out of their heart. It's what they want to do. And so we have to encourage them in that growth of that love for the job, because the job and the nature of what you do is so often what keeps someone in that spot. And so it's really important for us to do that.
That's very true. And I think that kind of goes into our next question about how to keep employees. Using incentives or benefit packages, or obviously engaging them and using their expertise might be a great way as well, besides just giving them a paycheck.
Well put. And I think that incentives are really a part of the future worker. And so what that looks like, and we often think in terms of just a compensation package that is a certain number of dollars at the end of the pay period, but workers are looking for much more than that, and it can be the game changer between someone coming to work for you and stay with you rather than go down the road. And those incentives can be sometimes as simple as understanding that the worker wants time to get a new horse started, and so engaging them and incorporating that into part of their day, or understanding that they have family commitments and they need to run someone to a doctor or this or that, and there might be a couple hours here, but they'll make that up for you. And I think there's a lot of give and take in the modern workforce. And when people understand that, they see that. So when we think in terms of incentives, us old school guys think in terms of dollars and holiday pay and those sorts of things, perhaps health packages, RSPs and those kind of provisions. But some of the best incentives that are out there help you to take ownership of what you're doing. I was working at one ranch where I had 4% of the calf crop that I would get at the end of the season when the calves were sold. That gives you skin in the game.
Totally.
And so the 2 a.m. calf check is a whole lot more meaningful because I'm not now just someone out there working for somebody. I'm a guy who has a vested interest here. 4% of this calf's survival comes my way. Totally. And I'm pretty excited about that. And so when you do the math on that, it doesn't play out to be tremendous dollars, but it gives ownership and it gives involvement. And it said to me that I trust you, I value you, I want you to be part of this process. I want you to feel like you belong here. And those were all really key things for me at that point in my life.
No, and those are very key. As soon as you get someone engaged and involved, it makes them much more apt to want to, give all that they have, kind of thing. Give them 110% or whatever you want to call it.
I think so, and I think this is a great opportunity, particularly for us guys, to engage with our wives and to hear what they have to say on some of the more creative opportunities out there, and to be researchers, to take a look at what are other people doing, what kind of incentives are out there. I heard of one ranch where they offered a $200 non-breakdown incentive during the haying season. So it kept the worker much more in tune with the machinery they was running. So when you heard that little off sound, you stopped and checked it out instead of just plowing through and carrying on. And then all of a sudden you have a breakdown that shuts you down for 6-8 hours. Yeah. Now you've got that worker fully engaged. When they first hear that ticking that shouldn't sound that like that, they get off and they check it out, make the small repair, and away they go. And they if they had no breakdowns during the harvest or the forage crop pull in, then you'd get a $200 bonus. So again, it was part of a creative incentive to say, you matter, we trust you, we want to reward you for your vigilance and your hard work. And I think that's a brilliant approach.
And I think that's actually a really cool incentive, because when we think of incentives, especially for ranch work, it might be room and board or food or a horse or a trailer or something like that, but having some other incentive that's maybe monetary that person can go use and enjoy. They need to buy some new, new ropes or something. And great, I got that $200 from not having the combine or the hay vine breakdown, and I can actually go and implement it and use something for myself. And it's a little gold star and a little bonus, and I bet you any money, depending on the size of the operation, there's multiple people haying, and it might be like a little fun competition too. So all of a sudden, your neighbor who's in the New Holland and you're in the John Deere, we're gonna see who's gonna make it to the end and not break down, and who's gonna need that $200 little, gold bonus.
I think anything that makes workers feel valued, and that's what keeps people at places much more than anything else. And that can be as simple as the classics in our world that tend to be part of the package, and usually include the housing or the vehicle or some sort of horse allowance, and those are really key things. And I think it's essential that we really refine those and we take a look at them. And one thing that speaks volumes to workers and it keeps them around is if you're in that housing situation, that their housing matters to you. So if there's something that doesn't work or is broken or is leaking or needs repair, that's a priority to you as an employer, and you can engage the employee to help repair it. But just the time, the allocation of the products and the materials and the funds to get that done, it says to me as a worker that I actually matter here. That when my roof leaks, you care. It's not just, well, it's an old house, kind of thing. So building those packages, thinking in terms of what makes that person feel welcome, what makes them feel like they're part of the operation and they're valuable. And there's a responsibility always going the other way. Employees need to dig down and go another round for their employers. And we've lost some of that loyalty. Where we have long-term retention, it is because that loyalty has been garnered, it's been developed, and it's contagious. New workers see that loyalty. They see people who've been there. I recently spent some time at a ranch that had 5 employees that have been there more than 20 years.
Wow.
And that's almost unheard of in this day and age. And they honor these people with a 20-year buckle. They have a 10-year buckle. They're just little things, but they come along and they say, I care that you're still with me. And their pay is a little bit less than some other people's. Their opportunities are a little bit higher. They invest in some opportunities for training. Another thing that's really important is to make sure that that worker is trained. I find that places that have a vibrant and alive health and safety program also have greater retention, because the worker says to himself, I matter. This this is important to him. He doesn't want me to be hurt.
I feel safe.
I feel safe. The places where the near miss is not just laughed off, it's actually discussed, and a provision is made so it doesn't happen again. Those guys go home and they feel like I matter, that it's important that I'm healthy. It's important that I show up here. I'm not just super replaceable and the next guy who comes down the road. And so again, that goes a long ways towards both retaining an employee, but retaining a quality employee who sticks around, who does a good job, who's loyal to the brand, who rides for you day, night, no matter the weather. And that has to be garnered. It has to be encouraged, because it isn't necessarily ingrained anymore.
No, that's true. Yeah, I can think of plenty of friends and family who have bounced between different employers because they didn't feel respected, or they didn't feel safe, or they didn't feel valued. And they went to find someone who did find who was valued. And when they got there, often there would be lots of employees that had been there for 5, 10, 15, 20, 40 years, you name it. Like, they were around for a long time because that atmosphere in that particular employment was very much of value and a respect.
Well, the respect is another thing. I'm glad you mentioned it, Bree, because respectful workplaces also are helpful to the retention of workers. We live in a day and age where there's very little tolerance, and certainly none within the regulations that apply for workplace bullying or harassment. And so recognizing the diversity of the workplace is really important, the diversity of the worker, and valuing and respecting that person, and realizing where those legitimate limits are and how far you can go and what's a practical joke or whatever. Those days have changed, and those things need to be understood. And at AgSafe, we've done a good job, I think, of developing some good guidelines for anti-bullying, anti-harassment policies that are realistic, and they realize that we live in a rough and tumble kind of world out there, but there are limits, and it is essential that it is a respectful workplace, a place where every worker of whatever background, whatever they bring to the thing, they're recognized and they're respected. And if they're not, they will be down the road, and there will be sympathy for those people, and they'll go down the road too.
Yeah, that's true. I think just holding space for your employees and making sure that, they feel valued, feel respected, know that they're part of the team and part of the overall mission or overall goal for the employment.
What's fascinating talking to you, because you are in that age group of those new workers who come along, and you use the word space, and space is a great word, because space is where you understand the parameters of how you function, but you get to make some decisions within it, and those aren't always second guessed. And I think that we can micromanage people to the point where we simply want them to be robots of what we would expect them to do. But those workers don't stick around. The ones who do stick around are the ones who you give them the parameters and you let them work with that. A classic example of that occurring was actually an orchard situation that I was engaged with, but there was 50 feet of hedges that needed to be trimmed. So we trimmed the hedges, kind of like the Three Amigos. So we trimmed the hedges of all the villages, but they were to trim this 50 feet of hedges. And so the employer was upset because they didn't trim all 50 feet and then pick up the clippings. They trimmed 10 feet and pick up the clippings, then trimmed another 10 feet. And what it did is it allowed them to not be sore. And the musculoskeletal injury, the repetitive strain, was not engaged there. But the employer was upset. It took the same amount of time. It took the same amount of effort and energy. But these employees had figured this out on their own. There was no harm in what they had done. But the employer was very upset because they didn't just trim the whole thing, then pick up the whole thing. They had broken it down. They had exercised a really sound decision ultimately in avoiding repetitive strain injury, and yet they were criticized for that. And so they all left. I mean, it didn't take very long before they went down the road to another place where that sort of incentive was given to them to have their own ingenuity brought to bear on the task and go, you know what, there's no harm done.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really important that people follow specific directions. And actually, I find that's another thing that retains employees. If they understand their job, if they understand the task that they've been assigned, if they understand that piece of equipment. So if you've done a really solid job in your orientation and in your training, then that worker feels much more confident and capable and prepared to go out and do that task for you. And so we live, as when I was a young guy, it was kind of, here's the keys, hop on and figure it out. Your generation, and I speak with great respect for your generation, but they want to be shown. They don't want to make the mistake. They don't want to look stupid. And so if they're walked through things, demonstrate it back, that satisfies the requirements of the occupational health and safety regulations and competency. But more than that, it says, I care about you. I want you to do this right. I want you to feel like you're comfortable doing it. And I want you to be able to come to me and tell me if you're uncomfortable with that task and not feel badly about that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when you go back to your example of the one ranch, they gave a monetary value of $200 if you didn't have a breakdown. I would much rather be well trained on that tractor and hay bind to know what to do in the off chance it does break down. And then that way I can, minimize that. And then, it's win-win for everyone because $200 is a lot less inexpensive than fixing a lot of equipment. So I'd much rather see, a little shuffle there than watch us having to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on new equipment because I was not trained properly to operate it effectively.
Very, very true. And I worked one place where the owner mocked me because when I was running the tractor, I wore hearing protection. And he'd pull up beside me and he'd be so disgusted because it took me a few seconds to pull the earplug out so I could hear what he said. And that's me in my generation, and you in your generation, everybody between us are in a mindset where it's like, no, I'm not willing to lose my hearing for working on this tractor to do this. It doesn't make sense. It's outside of the regulatory compliance. And so we need to respect that in those people. And when we do, by simply providing them with the earplugs, they appreciate that. They say, hey, the guy cares about me. And what does a set of foam earplugs cost? So
it's cheap and it's easy. And if you have supply with them, they can use it. If they, for whatever reason, feel the need to go deaf, well, that was their choice, but you gave them the option to make a choice. And I think that's really huge.
Well, as a supervisor, you need to be saying, put those in, put those in if they don't do that. And increasingly, as I say with great respect to your generation, they're not willing to do that. Coming back to that life-work balance, they want a healthy balance of that. They don't want to not hear their grandchildren. They don't want to not hear their friend on the golf course or at the beach. And so that's just the reality of where we're at. And it's a wise choice, and it's within the confines of the regulatory compliance as well. So it's really important. So I think there's some great people coming in to the industry. It's exciting to see the resurgence of some family members who've gone away from family farms and they're coming home. I can't imagine anything that's more invigorating to the life, place, and breath of a farmer ranch in this province than to have that occurring. I think it's excellent, and we need to have that same kind of respect for the kids when they come back as we would for an employee. Sometimes that falls by the wayside, and so when we talk about employee retention, a lot of those principles transfer over to family retention. Keeping them there, making sure that they understand that they are valued and that they have input, and that in the transition, I know you've done a session on succession planning, it has to be something where the son and daughter want to step in. And we have to create that opportunity for them in that environment, and that involves treating them like adults and treating them with respect and recognizing that they bring different skill sets that we need to embrace, and that things have changed and will change, and that maybe they're better prepared to handle that change than we, the employer, are. And so we need to have a good ear for that. Ultimately, the boss is the boss, and that's a good thing still. And you just want to be the boss that you always wanted.
Yes.
And I think that if we have that mindset, it changes things.
Totally. I like your point about having people come back to the farmer ranch. And it kind of goes into the next question about social isolation. You have these people who have left the ranch, or maybe didn't ever leave the ranch, but have lived in more urban centers or larger areas, and they're moving for a lifestyle change. They're moving to try something new. They're ready to tackle being farm manager or ranch manager. So what are ways to go about helping with social isolation? Is building communities on the ranch, depending on the size of the ranch, something that would help? Or because sometimes your neighbors, miles and miles away, like they're not super close. It takes you 30 minutes to go grab a cup of sugar. It doesn't take you 5 minutes like you do in the city.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that I've seen people be very successful with that. And one of them is building a culture that says, I'm proud to ride for X ranch. I'm proud to be a cowboy or a farmhand on this place. And within that comes then an actual sense of accomplishment of being part of that community. And then you do build, again, it comes back to relationships so often. You build a community that is unique. It's isolated sometimes, but it has value. And some of those people will have family, and some of them will be single, and incorporating those back and forth together and making sure that workers aren't isolated from the group. And that comes back to respectful workplace. There's some of those basic principles where we, in essence, point our moral compass towards being nice and caring. And when we're nice and caring, people will tend to be there. I sometimes get a little frustrated with the fact we have regulation that, in essence, the anti-bullying, anti-harassment regulation is simply regulation that says be nice.
Yeah.
And if we can be nice to our family, be nice to our employees, that goes a long way towards retaining them. And increasingly, the communities that are more isolated are more challenged by the fact that they are a fair ways from town. Places that have proximity to town tend to be able to hold families a little bit longer, a little bit better. But those other places just simply need to dive into their identity. People have gone there for a reason. They have gone to that remote location for a reason, to ride for that brand. And so we need to make that a very special thing to be part of. And I think that integration, games nights at the cookhouse, there's just different simple things that can be done. The world is gotten broader because of the internet and all of those things that do connect people. And so enabling and ensuring that they have adequate capacity to connect with the outside world, with friends and with relatives, and to do those things that you millennials like to do, the Skypey things or whatever it is. Yeah. Those things allow you to connect to a broader community. And in that broader community, it reduces isolation. When we reduce isolation, we create community. And once we've done that, then I have a sense of belonging. I'm part of this team. And even if it's a small team, it's important. As a young boy, I worked on, I'm going to mention a name, I worked for Dave Mertz for a couple of summers, and I left Dave's only because I went into the Mounties. But one of the things that Dave Mertz did, and I was the ranch hand, but I felt very much part of the family. Always had meals with the family. I remember Dave had a thing where once every couple of months he would buy me a new shirt. They'd be in town and he'd come home with a new shirt. It wasn't a big deal, but it sure made you feel like you were important and part of the family. And so I reflect on that over time very positively. It was a very simple thing. They didn't have a lot of money to throw around for their ranch hand, but they would go to town, they'd come home with a new shirt, they picked it out, and they knew my size. That made you feel really special.
Totally. It definitely makes that community atmosphere, that family atmosphere that you might not have when you're isolated and you're not with your own family.
Yeah.
So the fact that your manager, your boss is gonna be like, hey, Reg, I got you that lovely blue shirt, and the blue looks really good on you, and I know it's your size.
Well, thank you, Rick.
You're welcome. And it's something you can enjoy and you can wear, and you know that they care about you, and they
when someone can go to the store and buy you a shirt, know that it fits, you know that you matter.
Yeah. And
that's what so much of that was. And I think that as a young guy back in the mid 70s working for Dave Mertz and his lovely wife Lois, and being included in the family meals and just being treated as part of that organization, that meant an awful lot. And there was a significant amount of isolation. We didn't have cell phones, we didn't have internet, we didn't have any of those communication devices. You kind of drove to town when it was time to drive to town. And they just did a really good job of making you feel valued and important. And I learned that as a young man, that was a great way to retain people and to make them feel like they belong, they matter.
Totally. I think that's actually kind of a nice fit, talking about your example with Dave. He kind of obviously mentored you or brought you into the fold. So do you find that mentoring is a good way to help retain employees and work with them that way?
Well, it absolutely is. And we are mentoring. Whether we want to admit it or realize it or not, we are always mentoring. And so we can determine to be a good mentor or a poor mentor. The example that we set, am I the person that someone would want to work for? And so doing that self-examination and realizing that, you know, you're a person who flies off the handle, who yells at you know, young kids. And I worked one place where the owner would come by and he was really hard on the irrigation crew, which simply meant that I, as a ranch hand, was constantly doing irrigation because they didn't stick around very long.
No.
They were there for a day or two, a couple of yellings, and they're down the road.
Yeah.
They don't need that. And so now all of a sudden you're trying to rehire another kid from town or whatever it might be to take care of that, taking the time to train them and stuff instead of engaging with them in a pleasant manner. So I think that, yeah, that's a very big part of retaining people is ensuring that mentorship and the example that we set is a positive one, that we bring a positive energy to the entire operation so that they are enthusiastic because we're enthusiastic. There's a lot of tasks, you know, my riding partner, you know, we always laugh when it's pouring rain and stuff, and I usually look over at him and I say, are you feeling the romance today, you know, kind of thing, because the romance goes out of the job about 3 hailstorms in.
Yep.
And, you know, 3 16-hour days, and you know, it just is, it has to be fun. Fun environments are great places to work. People like to be part of that. You have to be welcome. You have to be respected, even though you're diverse. The reality is that some people are going to have higher skill sets than others. They are going to be the better roper or the better this or the better that, and that's okay, because recognizing that someone else is better in a different area is what makes you a solid team.
Yeah.
No football team wants all wide receivers, so you have to have the diversity of people, and I think the recognition and acknowledgement of that diversity by the employer also makes for someone being much more engaged in their location, and then the employer recognizing that. So one of the mistakes we tend to make is we'll take our top hand and make that person a manager or the Cowboys. Maybe they should just be the top hand, recognized, fully valued for that, compensate them well for being the top hand.
Yeah.
Maybe they're a 10 Cowboy, and maybe you've got a Cowboy who's a 6 Cowboy with a 10 manager. He should maybe be your manager, but equal footing, recognize the value of that top hand, compensate him properly, give him the time, reward him for that, and recognize that special nature of that individual, acknowledge their skill set, but don't try to put a round peg in a square hole.
Valid point. And I think it's, like you mentioned, it's important to lean on each person's strengths, right? So maybe someone's a really good bookkeeper and they're not a very good cowboy. Or maybe they're, yeah, like you said, a great boss, not a great cowboy. Great cowboy, not a great boss. So finding the fit and putting them in that proper fit just makes your whole operation function much more smoothly and more effectively.
It does, and it goes a long ways towards retention, because nobody knows quicker than the guy who dropped the ball, who dropped the ball. And if you're constantly dropping the ball, the tendency is to want to go down the road. So if you realize that, you know, yeah, you really enjoy your job, but you can't stand the administrative side of something, typically what happens is it just doesn't get done, and that's not to the advantage of the ranch. It's actually to the detriment of the employer. And so you want to make sure that you're developing skills in aptitudes that you see. So if you've got someone who's a very capable machinery person, make sure they're on the right side of the operation and that they're doing their thing well. And I think when you know your people and you can embrace their skills and strengths and feed into them and give them opportunity in those areas, those people love to come to work.
Totally.
They feel a sense of ownership, and that's important.
Totally. I think it helps also for people, especially if they're younger like myself, where you're wanting to like exercise or become an expert in a certain topic or whatnot. So maybe I really like administration work. So putting me in administration work allows me to perfect those skills and make myself a better person for either that particular employer or future employers down the road as well. So it's nice to be able to find your niche and work in your niche and help assist a larger, or like the bigger picture basically within your operation.
Yeah, excellent point. And I think that part of that comes right back to the basics of communication, of me actually hearing you and recognizing that that's something you're really interested in. So then I can look at that and say, how does this person better vantage me as an employer, as a manager of people on my ranch? So I could listen to that and understand that I can offload some things like maybe my range use plan to you.
Yeah.
We've got to deal with the inspection of the dams. Here's some paper flow for that. My health and safety program needs administration. Maybe you're a person to really be valuable in those kinds of things. And so I realized that maybe you're a 3 cowboy, but you're a 9 when it comes to the administrative thing. I'd rather cowboy than do paperwork. This can work really well. And so I think the recognition of skill sets is huge, and then to invest in those and to develop those things. There's lots of opportunities to do that. Mentorship is one of them, and that might be a neighbor, it might be someone across the countryside, it could be online. There's so many different ways that we can be educated now. And when people are fed into their passion, the person who has a passion for cattle genetics should be tapped into. And it shouldn't just be because I'm the employer that I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. If I can engage you and say, what are we buying for bulls? What's out there? What can you do? And I know you have an interest and a passion in that. I can really encourage you, and I can make you stick around with me a lot longer if I know that you're going to hear me in that. That as an employee that I have some value, that you trust me for my mind and for where we can go with that. I'm a happy guy who wants to stick around because I recognize that's important. So then you look at your compensation package, and maybe you can't pay as much as the guy down the road, and maybe your truck's a few years older, but you engage that person and you say, listen, I know you'd love to know about this. Can you research this? Come back to me, tell me what you think we should do. Let's discuss it.
I think it's a work smarter, not harder aspect too. So if you have that one person who loves cattle genetics, it makes more sense to send them to the bull sales, or for them to go do all the research behind the scenes, check out the EPDs, you name it, versus yourself who would much rather be out in the tractor to be, at this bull sale and having to chat with that person and absorb all that information and then go over here. It's a great way to, streamline your operation and go, this person's great at this, applaud them in some way through compensation. This person's great at this. Everyone's working in their lanes or their fields, and we keep going straight.
Well, and a lot of that comes back to the employee, because I have to demonstrate that I'm competent. I have to demonstrate that I'm trustworthy. I have to gain your confidence so that you could send me to a bull sale and I can come home with the right thing. And when we've got there, that's because we built a relationship and you learned to trust me, and I demonstrated ability to you, and I got myself to work and I worked hard for you, and you are now valuing me. And so it is a two-way street. And I think that too often employees are looking to their employer and saying, you need to do for me, while not, on the other hand, being willing to go the extra mile for the employer anymore. So it is a two-way street.
Yeah, trade for a trade kind of thing.
It is, and it'll be a better relationship for everyone. So a valued employee is a guy who makes himself valuable.
Totally.
So
I think that's really key points. And we've covered so many different aspects to this. We've talked about, implementing training and making sure that the employee is doing what their lane is for, and putting the right person in the right spot. And talk about mentorship and other opportunities, like using bull sales as a way to get out there and see and learn something as an employee, so you can come back to the ranch and show the ranch manager or whomever you report to some really interesting information and research. Is there anything else that you think is important for any kind of employee retention? Anything that?
Well, I want to go back to the word that you use, mentor,
yeah.
and emphasize the fact that you are a mentor. And you can be a good one or you can be a bad one. You are setting an example. Every time you go to work, you are setting an example of how to treat other employees. If I'm working for you and you're yelling at the guy beside me and I become the supervisor, I guess I'm learning that that's how I ought to do it. And at the end of the day, we're going to be looking for people. And it's not a long lineup when we have these jobs. I've often had discussions, because every health and safety program needs to have a discipline policy. And so WorkSafe BC will have a determination that you can verbally warn someone, give them a written warning, or release them.
Right.
Well, releasing has to be in the most grievous of circumstances, because there's no lineup out there for people looking to replace a lot of these positions.
True.
So often not an option for us in the real world. The real world says that we get the people who come and apply. So it's on us to make them better workers. It's upon us to make them a better, more valuable employee. And the fact that they're willing and they're there to service the industry in some way is a credit to them. So we need to take that as a very precious commodity and work with it and make sure that we do that. I think that when we offer development for an individual, and again to this mentorship concept, if we help them understand things, if we provide training for them, if we provide them, sometimes that's a matter of just in the efficiency of the year, finding the time where someone can pursue some understanding of something, whether that's welding and getting to be a better welder just through practice or watching YouTubes or taking a course or whatever it might be. That sort of professional development weighs well for you, and they realize as an employee that they are valued. So that sort of education. I think that cultivating a culture of belonging is from the top down. If you come to work and you know that people care about you and your well-being, your health and safety, your provision for you and your family, and the accommodation that might need to be made there, that cultivates a culture of inclusion. And I think that's one of the things that we want to do. I think that employers need to encourage feedback. And sometimes we're a little afraid of that. And we live in a generation that asks why a lot more than some of us used to do. And sometimes the answer is only because I'm the boss and I said so. Yeah. And that's fair game. Yeah. But other times an explanation for why are we doing it this way. Yeah. And sometimes hearing through that whole concept, encouraging the feedback, where you've got maybe an experienced person who comes to you and they've worked at 3 or 4 other sites, and they may have a different idea of how something has gone. Maybe there's something you can learn from that as well. So encouraging that feedback says to that individual, particularly with our younger generation coming into the workforce, they need to be heard and they need to know that what they say has value, it has impact, it has importance, and that even if it doesn't go their way, sometimes it's just the action of being heard that makes them feel valued. And you can explain to them, no, this is the way we do it here, and here's where we're going to go. But thank you for your input. I'll consider what you have to say. Maybe there is a better way to do this. Yeah. And so just looking at those things, encouraging that feedback. And the concept in today's employee retention pool of supporting the whole employee, not just the employee that comes to you for 8 or 10 or 12 or 14 hours in that day, but the whole employee. How are they doing? How is their family doing? What's their time off look like? What are they doing to improve their well-being in a variety of different ways? Where are they at with their mental capacity? Are they struggling with some things? Can they come to you and talk to you? Have you built a relationship that says that? And I think there's a lot of interest, and I think you would agree with me, speaking on behalf of millennials, that supporting the whole employee, the whole person is important to you. Am I right?
100%. Yeah, we definitely, as a culture or a group of millennials, we definitely enjoy when we come to work and be like, oh, how are you today? Is there anything I can help you with? You know, just having that community aspect that we seem to crave as a generation is great to come to workplace and not just feel like we're punching in and punching out, because there's nothing wrong with punching in, punching out at times, but a lot of the time you really want to feel included in the community and have camaraderie.
You know, and one of the things I do love about your generation is that there is a blending of I'd like to be heard, I need to know why, but there's also that reality that no, I'll listen to the old guy because he told me to go ahead and do it this way, and he seems to know what he's talking about. Yeah. And so I think that's really valuable. I think that the opportunity that we have in employment to feed back to our employees. I do annual reviews for the people that I supervise at AgSafe. Yeah. And it gives them an opportunity to see where they can improve, to understand where they're doing really well, to get feedback from the people that they're dealing with, and to be able to say, you're doing a great job. We need to improve a little bit here or do this or that. That feedback is usually very well received. It takes time. Yeah. All employment management takes time. And sometimes it's our downfall that we don't do it because it's not typically part of what we grow up in the ranching world thinking of. Yeah. In corporate world, it's a given. All the time. In our world, not so much. And it needs to be more of our thinking going forward, that we actually want to engage, that we want to give you feedback, that we want to tell you that you did a good job, that we don't want to make you feel stupid when you don't know something, but we want to fill the gaps. If there's a hole there in what you bring to the table, let's fill it. Let's not exploit it. Let's fill it. And I think that's important.
I think that was key about the communication. And as millennials, we really like to communicate. We would much rather you say, hey, Bree, you didn't do this quite right. This is kind of the way you should have done it, much more than just going, okay, do it, and then getting a cold shoulder or no communication at all and not knowing if we did it right or did it wrong, or when it, we break something down and all of a sudden, the employer gets excited and explodes in front of us, we really don't know. So we'd much rather that open dialogue, even if it is, you didn't do this right, because, we'd rather hear that than just say, okay, you broke it down, go away, go find something else to do. We don't want to deal with it, right? So we'd much rather be involved in understanding as well.
Yeah. I know millennials that I have watched at workplaces where I've been riding or working, and when something goes wrong and the boss just comes in, moves past them, steps in, fixes it,
Yeah.
doesn't say a word, and I watch their face, and their face says, I'm an idiot, you think I'm an idiot, I just proved I'm an idiot, and there's no way out of this.
Yeah, it's a whole bunch of shame.
There's no fix.
Yeah.
As opposed to that simple conversation that says, hey, that didn't go the way it's supposed to. Here, watch this. I'll show you how to do it. And there's a whole different read on that. It's like, okay, I'm learning.
Yeah.
And I think that we live in that information age where if you don't know, you want to learn. And whether that's as simple as a Google query or whatever it might be, the age and generation that are coming to the workplace for us are people who want to know. So don't just blow by me and show me that I didn't do it right. Show me how to do it right, because I want to be. And if we don't do that, they'll go down the road till they find the place where someone will show them how to do it right. I think that's important. I think that it's key for us to identify important players in the game. And there will always be in the field and work of agriculture those people who show up and they're there for the summer and they're going to move your irrigation pipe, and next summer they're not coming back, they're moving on to something else. And you kind of know that. So investing your time has to be in the right key players as you build your team. And I think that's one of the concepts we need to bury in the back of our mind, is that I'm building a team here. I have players on my team, and I need the guy who's going to come back year after year, instruct the other irrigation workers, instruct the other people doing this stuff, help me out with this, and he's faithful and he's there. I want to invest in that guy. I want to identify that guy early in the game, and I want to invest in him because he's going to make my life easier. Yeah. At the end of the day, good employees make the employer's life super easy. All of us as supervisors have had those people that we have really been challenged by. In my years as a supervisor in the RCMP, there were some guys that you were worried through the whole shift what was going to happen. There were other guys that you wish you had a dozen of them. And so as an employee, be the guy that everybody wants. As an employer, be the employer that every employee would want. So I think that's really important. I think it's key to give people, no matter what skill, age level they bring to you, whatever it is, give them room to grow. Let them have an opportunity to expand and to be more than they are when they show up. So if you do a mental inventory of the skill set that arrives, and you have a personal target goal that you can discuss with that person, say, I want to be able to turn you out to do the gather by yourself or with a couple guys under you, that's where I want to go. Yeah. So you're going to have to really know the range well. Yeah. That gives you something to work towards, and it gives me something to direct you towards. And when I'm confident that you're there, then I can do that. Yeah. And we're both better off for it. I think that you're happy because you are now doing a job that you like, you're trusted, you're responsible, and it's a win-win in that particular circumstance. I think that my last thought and point would be, if you want to be a great employee, then the place to start is to be a great employer. If you want to have a great employee, be a great employer. Yeah. Be the kind of guy that people want to come and work for. I can't say that enough. I think that when we provide a healthy environment, a place where people like to be, they like to have their family there, they like to bring their friends there, they consider themselves cared for and safe there. I think that's again another one of those things. And I guess that the whole process is one where we have to be proactive in developing good employees. It doesn't just happen. Yeah. As much as you want to plant and harvest a good crop, as much as you want to have good genetics in your livestock, it doesn't just happen. You have to work forward in that. So being proactive and being engaged in that process and being in front of potential challenges and difficulties in employee retention, I think that's super important as well. So all in all, I guess if I was to conclude that with one statement, it would be simply be the kind of guy that you would want to work for.
Totally.
Be the employer that you would want to be an employee in the care and trust of. These people are counting on you, and we need to count on them. And it's a mutual relationship that can be fantastic, or it can be the worst part of your day. And so we all want it to be the best thing we can. Be respectful, be responsible, listen to your employees, make firm decisions, let them know what they're to do. It's so confusing when it's something that I've worked for guys, you ride out 5 or 6 of you, and a cow boss rides off, and you look at each other and you go, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
And he just kind of rides off, and you sort of sit around for a while. And, well, I guess we'll go this way, you guys go that way, and see if we've got something. And then later he comes back and yells because you didn't clear out the right pasture. Well, everybody looks at each other and goes, I just felt really stupid.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
How could I possibly accomplish this? So you're listening for the next job open down the road. And we don't want to do that. We want to see people long-term, healthy and safe at a place that they love to be.
100%.
Yeah.
So those are really awesome comments, Reg. So we're going to turn it over to the viewers to see if you have any questions. And while I wait for you guys to ruminate on some questions, I just want to thank you guys for chiming in and using this as a resource for future. And of course, our funders, thank them again. So Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and the Government of BC through the programs delivered by Investment Agriculture Foundation of BC and the BC Cattlemen's Association. And all of this will be posted, the recording will be posted on our website and our YouTube channel, www.cattlemen.bc.ca/coffeeshoptalks. If for whatever reason you can't find it online, give us a shout at the office, 1-877-688-2333, and we will shoot that to you via email. And of course, we do have a follow-up survey for all of these webinars that can be found on the website or by emailing or calling us. We'd be happy to get it. So I see that there's no other questions. So Reg, do you have any final parting thoughts or?
Well, I just want to say thank you, Bree, to you and to the sponsors and to the BC Cattlemen's Association for tackling some of these issues that are the kinds of things that often don't get spoken about. And I appreciate that you created an environment where that can happen, and so people can take advantage of that on their own time. Maybe pick up a pearl. That's all that is ever intended, is that maybe one thing that someone said on any one of these coffee shop talks is something that resonates with you, and maybe you're a little bit better employer because of one nugget that you picked out of that pan today, and that would be my hope. And you know, it's a great lifestyle. It's a great opportunity for young people to come back into a lifestyle opportunity that now exists in ways that it didn't a few years ago. So let's keep that rolling. Let's make it be a place where people want to work and live and be there for a long time, loyal to the brand and willing to ride long and hard and work for that employer for a long chunk of time.
Well, thank you very much, Reg. The Public Affairs Education Committee did a great job curating and creating this little series, so I'm happy you were able to put it together. And thank you again for joining us for our second Coffee Shop Talk and imparting all your great wisdom with us. So
yeah, I wish, but thank you. Yeah, sometimes you just stumble through things. As I say, I just have the privilege of being invited onto farms and ranches throughout the province, and I keep my mouth shut and my eyes open in some of these things, that I can watch and see what makes for that happy employee. What makes that guy want to stay there? Why are there 20-year employees at one place and 2-month employees everywhere else? So I think that if we've been able to translate a little bit of that, that's been good. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you all for chiming in, and be sure to chime into our last two on mentorship and financial management. Until then, that was a Coffee Shop Talk.